I hope we have people joining from the previous session now. I'm very happy to welcome you to the first workshop of the Career Fair, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Martijn Bijker, who is the founder of Science to Pharma. Science to Pharma is the only existing medical science liaison, short MSL, training platform. Martijn has moved to MSL after an academic career ending with a postdoc. Since then, he has been employed in an MSL role by major pharma companies such as Amgen, Merck, and currently Theramex. In this workshop, Martijn will teach us how to transition from a PhD into an MSL role and draw on his experience from this. So he will especially focus on how to write a good MSL-targeted CV that is not rejected within the first seconds. Now, without further ado, Martijn, please take the center stage.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to have you all here. If you have any questions, please send them to the chat or the Q&A. I should be right to see looking at them and presenting at the same time. So, yeah, my name is Martijn Bijker. I'm from originally in the Netherlands. I'm living now in Australia, and I will share a bit about how to become an MSL without industry experience. Let me see if you see my screen. Yeah. So today the agenda will be who am I, a bit about myself, a bit about my career transition from science to pharma and my learnings. I started as an MSL in pharma, but are now working as a medical director. I'll tell you what the MSL role is about. I'll share with you what it takes to become an MSL without any pharma experience, what kind of preparation it is that you require. And a Q&A session, probably we'll discuss a bit about share your strengths and weaknesses as a researcher. And we have then a CV session, making an industry CV. So that's at the end. So we do the presentation about the MSL role, some Q&As, and then the CV session. So my background, you could probably guess I'm from the Netherlands with all the flowers, the windmills, the cheese. That's where I'm from originally. I'm currently in Australia. It's 6:00 p.m., so it's almost my evening. I'll tell you a bit about my story, how I got where, but I'm close. I used to be close to you guys next to Germany. So a bit about my background. I did a bachelor in chemistry, so hardcore chemistry. I did a master's in biochemistry. I actually did I majored in 3 areas, so biochemistry, then immunology, and then immuno-oncology. I did a 9 months internship in the US in immunology. I really enjoyed it. My wife was there. I was there. I wanted to stay. My wife didn't want to stay there, so she said, let's go back to the Netherlands and do your PhD there. So that's what I did. I worked in Leiden University Medical Center in cancer vaccines. Very interesting work. This is now kind of immuno-oncology, how to reject cancer. So that was a big topic nowadays in research, but also in pharmaceutical industry. I had 5 research papers, had 2 reviews, and roughly after 4 years, it's 5 years in the Netherlands. So after 4 years, I said to my wife, 3.5 years, honey, we have to get ready to go overseas again. So that's when we decided to go overseas. I said US, she said no. She said Canada. I said too cold or French speaking. She said UK. I said it's too close and too wet. So there's 2 countries left, New Zealand and Australia. I said New Zealand is too small, not a lot of research. Actually went there for a conference, but didn't find anything. Then we had Melbourne. I had Melbourne high on the list then. Didn't work out, and eventually I landed in Sydney. I did a postdoc in immunology and neuroscience. I had 3 fellowships, and it's probably my worst time of my life as a postdoc. And the reason for that is what I did like about academia is reading science, discussing science, collaborating with people. I often love the presentation side of the role a lot, and also the journal clubs, so discussing papers, presenting papers. I was involved in quite a few committees, organizing conferences like these, ones you have today. Really enjoy the interactive part of science, but as you probably all know, science is not that. I was complaining all the time. I didn't like my job at all. I didn't enjoy the experiments. I didn't mind thinking about them. I didn't mind planning them. I didn't mind about reading and discussing them. But actually doing the experiment was the part I didn't like, which is a bit hard if you still have to do the experiments to get the results. I didn't like writing grants, even though I got my 3 fellowships. The culture in academia wasn't great. Long-term focus is also difficult in academia. You have 2 to 4 year projects. On the one hand side, it's good because you have 2 to 4 years of money, but once the money runs out, you have to find something else. A little self-development and also a little career progression. If you're maybe the favorite of the professor, you might get to the next level, but if not, then it's going to be tough. So I enjoyed science. I thought science was only being done in academia, so that's why I stayed in science, but I think there's more to it. So I was a bit of a challenge during my postdoc, wasn't happy in my role, liked the science, didn't want to leave, just moved around the whole world, across the whole world to do a postdoc, so I was reluctant to leave academia, but I eventually did it. I started my career at Abbott as an MSL, and people actually told me, I think you're probably better off as a medical science liaison talking about science, and that really sounded great to me, talking about science and not having to do the experience. So that sounded like music to my ears. So my first role was as an MSL at Abbott, which was later on split into Abbott and AbbVie, into two companies. I worked on anti-TNFs, Humira, and worked on Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. My second MSL role was at Amgen, and I really enjoyed that one because it was back to my roots, immuno-oncology. I loved immuno-oncology. I did my master's in it, PhD, my postdoc. I really enjoyed immuno-oncology, and I was going to work on phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials, first in human studies, immuno-oncology. We had bispecific T-cell engager antibodies. We had injectable oncolytic viruses. It was really cool stuff. So that was hematology and solid cancers. Really enjoyed that part. Then, I mean, I got into an MSL role, and a lot of people ask me, so Martijn, how did you get in? Why? People say you have to have 2 years experience, or every job advertisement says you have to have 2 years experience. So how did you get in without an experience? So what I did, actually, I started helping people, teaching people, coaching people to help them get into the MSL role as well. And when I was in my MSL role at Amgen, I had started my MBA, and 1 year in my MBA role, 1 year in my MBA, and I think my second year as an MSL at Abbott, 1 year into my MBA, and in my second year of my MSL role at Amgen, I had back surgery. I was out for 7 weeks, and my brain, I mean, I was immobilized, but my brain wasn't immobilized. I was thinking about things I could do, and I thought, why don't I make something out of this training? I mean, I'm coaching people, doing phone calls, lunches, tea catch-ups. Why don't I make a training out of this? And that's what I did. So that was my entrepreneurial side. I called it from science to pharma, going from science to a pharmaceutical industry job. And it was actually very interesting. I started to coach one person face-to-face. Then I had someone on the Skype. I then had 3-4 people face-to-face. Then I started doing webinars with people from different countries, Europe, Australia, different states wanted to join from the United States, Canada. So I started doing webinars, and it was 2-hour webinar, 3-hour webinar, 4-hour webinar, across 3 times. So it's a bit of a challenge to plan that, but it was really going well. So I really enjoyed it, helping people get into an MSL role. So from that, I moved into, let me see, so just to add, so far, from science to pharma has been growing in the last 6 years, and I just looked up yesterday how many countries we've covered in the world where we have trained people and helped people. So except for a few countries in Asia and a few countries in Africa and South America, Middle America, I think we covered most of the countries where we've trained people. So yeah, we reached a lot of people, which is very great, and we're very fortunate to have helped people move to a different career. I've stayed in pharma. So I moved from an MSL role to different roles. I worked at Merck, so the German Merck, the real Merck. I worked as a biomarker liaison manager. I also work as digital strategy manager, which comes in very handy now with the COVID, more digital work, also with my entrepreneurial business. Moved up the ranks in medical as a medical advisor. Also did pipeline launch lead. So we had a drug that we had to bring to the market. That was Bavencio, which is an immuno-oncology product, an anti-PD-1, anti-PD-L1, if I'm correct. Yeah, anti-PD-L1. Great product. And currently I'm a medical director working in pharma still. So I kind of combine the two. We have a large team of people that work behind the scene from science to pharma. Digital people, IT, coaches, and people that develop courses. So it's grown out from an MBA project almost to something very big and very exciting. So what degree do you need for the MSL role? So that's a lot of questions people ask. And this is a poll. I'd like you to get some input into me so I know who I'm talking to, because I can't talk to all of you directly. But so, are you a bachelor student, a master student, PhD students? Probably a lot of PhD students here today. A postdoc, maybe even a pharmacist or a PharmD, or a medical doctor, either finished or in training. So if Big Market can start the poll. And it's interesting, right? So I'll just talk while you do this. A lot of questions we get from people is, what kind of degree do I need to have? Do I have to have a medical degree, pharmacy degree, a PhD degree? And it kind of differs per country, and also differs a bit per disease area. So certain diseases are more requiring more PhD students, like oncology, the difficult diseases like oncology, immunology, and some of the, I won't say simpler diseases, but maybe less fancy, maybe cardiovascular, diabetes. They're often less requiring people with a lot of research background. So there often you might not have to do a PhD. So I do it later. Just see, can we polls? Barbara, have you opened this one? Or should I start it myself?
Yes,
oh, you have done it?
It is open, and you can see it under polls, and then go to the open polls, and there you have the answers.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Do the people see it themselves, or should I just walk them through? I
think they can see it. Maybe comment in the chats.
I'll comment. So it's 3% bachelor, master student 22%, PhD student 68%. I saw a quick shift. 9% postdocs, pharmacists 1%, and no medical doctor. So majority, 2/3 is PhD students. So I'm going to close it now. So we have it closed. Thank you. So let me see presentation. Yeah. So that's good. So a lot of PhD. So the background of a scientist, and I'll come back to the numbers a bit later on. I've got numbers for a lot of countries in Europe and also in the world. As a scientist, it doesn't hurt if you've got a PhD or postdoc. I mean, it's good. You can still become an MSL with a master's degree, Master's of Science, and it depends a bit per country. Bachelor of Science, we still see it. It might be a bit too early. You might need to be a bit more mature in terms of research career and maybe age as well, because you might still be a bit young. As a pharmacist, PharmD, M-Pharm or B-Pharm, those are roles or backgrounds people have. And medical doctor, so especially in the US, PharmD is big. Australia has a lot of B-Pharms, a lot of people who are pharmacists move into the pharmaceutical industry and then move into an MSL role. So they have like a step in between. Medical doctors, a lot of the Asian countries have more medical doctors. Some of the German companies overseas require you to have a medical degree. So it depends a bit per company as well. So these are the differences. The strengths and weaknesses, which is really interesting to know as well, because it's medical science liaison, right? So it's medical science liaison. A lot of people focus a lot more on the science. So I'm a scientist, I can talk science, but you're talking to doctors and you're talking about patients and disease and treatment. So it's a lot more medical. It's probably more medical clinical liaison than medical science liaison. So it's about science, but you talk to a doctor not about so much about science, about clinical science or medical science. So your strengths are often your disease pathway knowledge. You know all about the disease, your pathways, how a drug or how the MEP kinase pathway works, how a receptor works. That's great. Your negative is often the clinical disease knowledge. You haven't really, most of the times, worked in clinical diseases or worked in a hospital where you work with clinical patient materials. I mean, if you're lucky, you have, but not always. A lot of the PhDs they haven't. Your drug knowledge is often limited, maybe to the few drugs you use that might be in development. And a lot of the, and that's just the what do you call it? The negative or the weak part of the science is a lot of the thing it's about talking about academic science, which is not the case. Pharmacists, of course, more clinical disease knowledge, more drug knowledge, which is great. Hospital system, depending if they're a hospital pharmacist or just a normal pharmacist, they have more understanding of the hospital system, how it works, which is great, understanding how doctors work, how the system works, the reimbursement, all these things, approval of your drug. Great. They're often more generalists, so they haven't specifically focused on cardiovascular or oncology. They're often more like, I can do a lot of things, which is their weakness because they have the breadth but not the depth. And the disease pathway knowledge depends, right? Often they don't have the disease pathway knowledge that a researcher like yourself have. And a medical doctor, clinical disease knowledge is high and strong. Hospital system, often great because they work in a hospital system or at least in the medical system. Drug knowledge, they know a lot about this one. Challenge often for them is they want higher salary because most medics already earn a lot of money. So moving to pharma might not make them jump. While you're a scientist, most of you are stipend, earn not a lot of money as a PhD student, or sometimes you have to pay as a PhD student, and then you move up to you get quite a good of a salary. And also the medical doctors, the disease pathway knowledge is not as great in general. So here a bit of an overview of the MSL requirement degree. So we talk about terminal degree, so PhD, PharmD, or MD. And so I highlighted Germany because you guys are in Germany, but I think it's also more European. So there's Belgium, Canada, Italy, Switzerland, Sweden, Austria, Poland, Spain, UK, Netherlands, and Portugal. So this is the percentage of people who have an MSL job that have a terminal D degree. So PhD, PharmD, or MD. It's quite high, 78% for Germany, and Europe is kind of around 70, 60%. Interesting, in Netherlands is 50%. I know a lot of the people have done a master. So when I finished a long time ago, you did straight away masters. You didn't do bachelor masters, you did a master. A lot of people who finish a master, it's quite a high level, I think similar in Germany, quite a high level of research and thesis you had to write already for your masters. They can get into a medical science liaison role. PhD is beneficial. You don't have to have it. And some people ask me, should I do a PhD or not? I mean, PhD might be 4 or 5 years. It's a lot of struggle, a lot of hard days and work and weekends and little earnings, or something you even have to pay. In that 5 years, you can get a lot of experience in pharmaceutical industry. Maybe not as an MSL, but maybe as a sales representative, as a clinical research associate in regulatory affairs and other things. That's a lot of time you can spend on a PhD or getting real life experience in the pharmaceutical industry, and you're getting a salary. So keep that in mind when you're deciding, I need to do a PhD to get an MSL role. It is needed. It's not needed, but it's highly regarded. Let these numbers speak for you. I always tell people, talk to people on LinkedIn, reach out to them, or just search them on LinkedIn, right? So search on LinkedIn people in MSL in your country where you live, look at their background, and if they don't have a PhD or do have a PhD, do you think was it needed? You ask them, or how did they get into an MSL role when they don't have a PhD, and ask them. You might already see it in their profile. They've been 2 years sales rep, 2 years clinical research associate, and then became an MSL. Great, you got your answer there. So keep that in mind. I'm just going to quickly check if there's any questions so far. So maybe let me quickly look at Sida asked, are there trainee programs in MSL for graduates? So From Science to Pharma is the global online training platform that has all the training for you. So Sida, that's probably what you can go to, from sciencetopharma.com. What are the chances of getting an MSL position without any medical background or degree? You don't need a medical background. You need a probably the minimum you need is a science, pharmacy, or a medical background. So if you're a Master's of Science or a PhD in biology, life sciences, that's enough, Julio. So you need to, I mean, you're going to work with diseases, right? So you need to know about pathways, you need to know about humans, body, system, physiology. So you might not have done it like a doctor, but at least you know about what a spleen is, how the blood works, how a receptor works. So those things you need to know. Goxim, is there any option for postdocs in MSL pharma companies? There are. That's not what I focus on today. I'm not. So I left research, so this is all about non-research pharma work. So there are, but not the topic for today. Sarah, do you think learning science as separate pieces is effective as much as an official degree through workshops and seminars? I mean, definitely PhD is great, Master of Science is great. Learning science as separate pieces, you need to know about, I mean, learning about a different disease area, like for instance, hematology or lymphoma, leukemia, you might have done it during your PhD, but you can quickly upskill yourself on that. You're smart, you finished your Master's or your PhD, you can quickly upskill on something else, just requires your time, resources, and reading. So that is, just takes time. So those things you can do. You don't get a degree in it, but you have to put it on your CV to make sure that people see that you actually done it. Because a lot of people only want to put things on their CV when they've got a physical paper out of it, like a degree or diploma. But just doing things that are important to put on your CV, because if I don't see it on your CV, I will never read it and don't know that you have done it and that you might be a great candidate, and then your CV might go in the trash. So if these are worthwhile things, and we come to that in the workshop, definitely put those things on your CV that people actually see what you've done. Hope that answers your questions. Which background immunology, cancer research is in high demand? Neuroscience is high, like immuno-oncology, oncology, immunology are three high ones. I did all three of them, so that's great. Neuroscience, I also did a bit, so I was in a great area. Neuroscience, a lot of things coming there. Cardiovascular, those are probably the top 4 or 5. Research, so Margarita, I'm not going to discuss the research in pharma. With no specific training in chemistry, how difficult could it be to get into pharma? It's just about upskilling. It's a lot about training, upskilling yourself. What you've learned as a PhD is really to know where to look for how to quickly find your resources, read them, and get upskilled. If you can do that, you can learn anything. Make sure you do it and prepare well and make sure you have the right resources. Everything is possible. And the last one before I go, Nishita, I wanted to know if a PhD in computational biology can join a company as an MSL. Yes, but you probably need to upskill yourself more on disease knowledge, right? I mean, I did mouse research and in vitro research. You need to upskill yourself on disease. I mean, what is a disease? What is it? How do you diagnose it? How do you treat it? What are the drugs? What are the medical side effects, adverse events? So those things is just a big learning curve to learn, but you can. You probably have to show on your CV that you have learned those things and upskill yourself. So I think I'm going to delete that one. Delete that one. I think I covered most of them. Okay, so let's go further, and I'll just come back to later on. Let me see. The MSL role. Audience question. What do you know about the medical science liaison role? Is it the first time you hear about it today? Is it? I have heard about it before, but I'm not sure if it's right for me, and you're kind of a bit hesitant about it. That's why you're here to try to learn more. Or I've heard it before, and I really want to learn more, and you're kind of excited to know about it. Fourth one, I think it will be nice. It will nicely match my skills and personality. So a lot of people might think that they maybe like me, or want to talk about science than doing the actual science in the corner of the dark lab. 5, it's the dream job I am working towards. Or 6, I've already applied to MSL roles. I'm going for it. I might not be successful, but it's my future. So if you can start a poll, I'm going to have a look, see how we go. Polls open. So there's a lot of people have heard it for the first time. And it's interesting. I've been doing these kind of presentations for the last 7, 8 years. more and more people have heard about the MSL role when I present to PhD students and postdocs and then university students. More than 5 or 6 years ago. But I'm kind of pleasantly surprised that's almost 60% of you have never heard about the MSL role. And that's probably also the challenge, right, in research. You go for research, you do your Master of Science, you do your PhD, then your postdoc, then your group leader work, then your grant, then your professorship. There's not much you hear about other roles, and I think these career fairs like Horizon are great to learn more about what's out there. So if everybody has clicked, I'm going to stop it now. Close poll. I'm not going to close it yet. I'm going to tell you 61% have heard it for the first time. 90% has heard it before, but they're not sure, a bit hesitant. 14% are excited. 4% say that nicely matched their personality and skill. 0% it's the dream job I'm working towards. Maybe at the end of the day, you might, maybe we should do it again, this poll at the end, so see if you think it might be a dream job. And 3% have already applied to MSL roles and they're going for it. So maybe those 3%, I'm not sure how many people those are, maybe put a few lines in the chat. We can have a bit of a chat later on or discussion about what your experience was so far. I'd love to hear more about it. So I'm going to close this poll. Oh, it's already closed for me. Great, thank you very much. And we go to the next slide. So MSL job definition. Let me take a bit of a sip before. And this is, it's a bit dry. It's on paper. We're going to talk a bit more about it. Just 5-6 bullet points about the MSL job definition. These are coming from job descriptions and job ad boards. And there's also some keywords you need to think about and remember in your CV when you talk to people. Use the right lingo, right? So build peer-to-peer relationships. So they want to see you as a peer to the doctor. Peer-to-peer relationship with clinicians and other key opinion leaders. KOLs is another term. And obtain information about the standard of care. That's the drugs or the treatment that people are using. The treatment algorithm. What are you going to use first, second, third, fourth? Patient referral pathway, patient flow, and any obstacles that lie in the way from getting this drug from research to the patient. Maybe this drug requires genetic testing first, like BRCA1, BRCA2 mutation for breast cancer, for ovarian cancer. If you don't have the test or the test takes too long, I actually worked on KRAS and NRAS. If the test takes too long, the doctor can't wait for the chemotherapy to be given to the patient. So if you can't come up with a test as a company to diagnose the right patient for your drug, no one's going to use your drug. So that's something that the medical team will have to work on, and those obstacles have to be removed, talking to geneticists, talking to pathologists, making sure the turnaround time is short enough. So those are things you do, talking and working with clinicians and other key opinion leaders, or we call them stakeholders, another pharma lingo word. So another thing I like that they act as a conduit of medical, clinical, scientific information about clinical trial activities, because often you're involved in clinical trials, right? So the companies testing their clinical lead molecules in phase 1, 2, 3 trials. You're often involved in more phase 3 trials. So the clinical research associate, the CRA, is doing the trials, but you are then often working together with the CRA, presenting at the hospital to the clinician, to the study manager about the trial, about the science, and you also then share the results of the trials with those clinicians and those we call them trialists, people who are doing the trials for you, trialists, about those pipeline molecules. And so that's really, I mean, exciting. I've worked in first immune studies. No one had used that drug, the combination of drugs in patient. And we had the first patient in the whole world being injected in Australia. And I mean, you're part of a breakthrough in medical research, which is great as a non-medic, I think. So the next one, build familiarity by clinical trials with the drug, so the doctors can use the drug before it's on the market, and also kind of advocacy. So when you share data with them, they become familiar with the data, they get to know the data, they start to like it or maybe not. So you have to get used to the data. So that's your role as an MSL. Get them involved in trials in your country so they can use the drug, know how it works, what are the challenges, the side effect profile, the dosing profile might be very tricky dosing. And they might get more, because they're using it, they get more excited about it. I mean, I worked with a drug, like I said, one was an injectable oncolytic virus into a tumor, which is pretty cool. And then it divides and kills the tumor cells. The other one was a small bispecific T-cell engager, which actually was a continuous infusion with a 24/7 pump you had to have where the antibody was in there to activate the T cells to kill the tumors. So very cool drugs, but also difficult. So you have to have them use these drugs in the clinical trials and get used to how this works. And they can then tell you what works well, what doesn't work, what should you try to change as an MSL or as a medical team to make this drug successful later on when it comes to the market. So yeah, scientific. So you need to know, you need to like scientific presentation. You need to like people because you work with people. So you give scientific and clinical presentations not only to internal sales team and the internal stakeholders, but also provide and organize education to healthcare professionals about the science, the clinical data of the product and disease. So it could be physical presentation, it could be reviewing materials, sales materials, scientific materials, slide decks. So it's very scientific focused. One thing you have to remember, and I'll come to that a bit later, MSLs do not sell. You should not be judged on how much sales you have generated. You are there to provide the doctor with an accurate and balanced information so the doctor can make an informed decision about the quality use of medicine. So medical department, where the MSL is part of the medical department, we always talk about quality use of medicine. So use the drug, the right drug in the right patient at the right time at the right dose. That's what we're here for. And you use clinical trial data and you share it with the doctor, and you don't try to make it, you don't try to sugarcoat it. You say if it's great, it's great. If not so great, it's not so great. You're trying to be balanced and unbiased as a medical person. And that's where you get the trust and that peer-to-peer relationship with your doctors if you try not to sell. Once you start selling, they see you as a similar as a sales rep, and they might treat you differently. If you say, okay, I'm trying to be impartial, I don't get my pay doesn't matter if I sell or not, or if you prescribe or not. I'm here just to share the data, and I don't mind whatever you prescribe. You see the guard going down, and they kind of are more open to start talking to you. So very interesting. So we do not sell. As an MSL, you're kind of like a spider in a web, or like an octopus. You have all your arms out there, working with a lot of different people, internally and externally. And it can be at every step of the product development process. We call it often product life cycle of a drug, like early stage, launch, and post-launch, and generic competition. And what you're trying to do when you talk to these doctors either use your drug in the clinical trials, or they're trying to, or they're using it in clinical medicine in a daily life. You're trying to get their input, their insights, their challenges from them, and you bring it back to the company, because that will really tell you, are we doing the right things? Are we focused on the right patients? Are we missing something? Is there some educational missing that people don't know about it? Is there a side effect that people are afraid of the side effect when they use the drug? So if we can take away that side effect or have them manage the side effect much better, then the drug would be much better. For instance, I worked on Erbitux and anti-EGFR. The side effect of anti-EGFR treatment is skin rashes. And a lot of people don't like skin rashes. A lot of the female patients say, okay, I don't want to have skin rashes all over my face. But you can use prophylactic antibiotics, and prophylactic antibiotics can prevent the skin rash coming up. So teaching the doctors or educate them with a dermatologist about preventing skin rashes using prophylactic antibiotics would lower their reluctance of using a drug, in this case for colorectal cancer, which was actually a very effective drug. But because of the side effect, people were reluctant to use it. But if you take away that side effect or the challenges with the side effect, they say, okay, great, this is a great drug. Quality use of medicine goes up, less side effects. It's a great drug, let's use it. So that's what medical often works on. I sometimes when I tell people that the MSL team or the medical team is like a Formula 1 racing team, right? So the salesperson is the person who jumps in the car, does 30, 40, 50 laps, wins the race. Hooray! We win the cup, and we make a lot of money. The MSLs, the medical team, is the one that makes sure the car is ready, the race car, the motor works well, the engine, the tires, the petrol is the right one, the grid is clean, everything is perfectly clean, so that when the sales guy comes in, they can do the job, and everything is easy for them. And then they take the credit because they say, look, guys, we're such a great salespeople, but all the work is done behind the scene. All the preparation is done by medical, so that when the guys come at the start of the Formula 1, they have an easy ride. So think about it. So that's really a lot of process, and every drug is different, every company is different, every environment is different, and that makes it so interesting if you work in a medical science liaison role. Let me check quickly some questions. if there's any. So we have 34 minutes in there. Any Q&A questions? Does the MSL role require a lot of traveling? I'll come to that, so I will answer it later in the slides. So Julio, I'll come back to that to lead. Katerina, is there a specific training workshop on social interaction skills within the company, or external training is considered an advantage prior to recruitment? I mean, you have to be good in social interaction. So these things, you either have it or you don't have it, right? So you're good in with people, you're good in talking. There's training you can do, like we call it soft skill training and engagement skill training. Often you get those trainings when you're in a company, but you should be a natural speaker. You shouldn't be afraid walking up to someone, strike a conversation in the line, waiting for, I don't know, for your coffee, have a chat with someone. So that's something you should be natural. If you're an introvert, I've seen people who are introverts who can be an extrovert in the MSL role. They did well. And I've seen introverts that were real introverts that they were reluctant going up to people, and they really were not great for the job, and they moved. There was like a promotion, the promotion they had, but it wasn't the right job for them. So Amar, I'm a pathologist at Cancer Hospital in New Delhi. What are options for me? Depends. We'll see. This might be an option for you. So those are the questions. So let's move back to this one. So product life cycle of a drug. So this is very important for you to remember. Like I said before, on the left side, so for me, yeah, left, drug goes to clinical trial phase, right? You've got preclinical, like in the lab, the mice work. Then you do the phase 1 study, first in human, so first time in a human, FIH you call it. Then you do a phase 2, phase 3 studies. More and more patients come in there, more and more investment, takes more time, more patient. And hopefully everything goes well. The data looks good. The regulators then have to review it to say, it looks good, guys, great data. It's safe, efficacious, you can make the product. You're allowed to start selling it now. So that's the launch. Then you start to sell it. Sorry, not you start to sell it. The company starts to sell it, the sales reps. You have your growth phase, you have the maturity phase, and decline phase. And then at the end, you have your loss of market exclusivity. So there's generics coming to the market, cheaper generics. And then you start all over again. You have another product coming to the pipeline. So as an MSL, I've been involved in first in human studies all the way to generic competition and anything in between. So there's different things you can do as an MSL at different stages of the product life cycle. In the first phase, like prepping, like I said, you're the Formula One racing team. You have to make sure everything is kind of ready for launch. You make sure that if there's a pathology test needed, it's there, that the turnaround time is quick, that the doctors are trained about the disease. For instance, I worked on Merkel cell carcinoma, a very rare disease. No one had heard about it. So 200 patients in Australia, probably 600 and maybe 500 in Germany. Very rare disease. How do you pick it up? So you have to make sure that people know what it is. And so they have to find it. So you have to educate them about the disease. Once they find it, you have to tell them where to refer them to. So that's all education you need to do with your doctors to make sure that the patient you have are, 1, diagnosed, and 2, are referred to the right doctor or center to be treated. Later on, it's shaping. So in the prepping phase, it is people on your clinical trials are using the drug, maybe 10, 20 people in the country. Then when it goes launched, every man and every woman can now use it as a doctor. And there's very capable people can use the drug. But if it's a very difficult drug, side effects might be a challenge. I mean, if you have a doctor that sees 500 patients a month, or you see someone who prescribes and now sees 5 patients a month, they have less understanding how to work with side effects of a drug. So you need to do more education with doctors, and that's then in the shaping phase. So every part of the product life cycle of a drug has different things that a medical science liaison need to do, and that's very exciting. So how it all connects. So this is like a picture I really like, makes it visual. I like visual pictures. You have the MSL, you have the key opinion leader, a KOL, or a doctor, and this is often the stream of data. And a lot of people think about an MSL educates a doctor. Don't say that as an interview, because an a doctor don't like to be educated, because they think, I'm a medical doctor, you're not. So you're not educating me, because that's like, I'm here, you're there, and you're not educating me. So don't say I'm educating people. You're sharing data. But then people stop, because they say, okay, I'm telling them, but you should listen as well. If you ask something, you share something, you should ask questions to get the information back. So this is how I see this whole process really nicely panning out. So the internal stakeholders need insight, right? So before you get it registered, your drug with the regulators, you might need to get reimbursement. So in Europe, it's the government needs to pay for it, and there's strict rules for that, and then strict data requirement for it. You have clinical data requirement. What is not known by the doctors? Do they need education? All these things are more strategically done in the internal teams, and they want you then to talk to the doctors to find those answers to those questions they have. So they can do market research, cost a lot of money, a lot of time, but they can also use you. You're talking to the doctors every day in, day out. And you share with them the latest clinical data. But while you share it, you ask them, look, so is this something you kind of see on a day-to-day basis? Yeah, maybe no. Is this a side effect something that worries you? Yes or no. How would you manage it? Okay, would you manage it this way? Would you use this drug maybe first line, or would you use it second line? Would you use it for the younger patient or only the elderly patient? All those questions, while you share the data, you can ask with the doctor, and then you get your insights back, your clinical insights. So to do that, you'd have to be a scientific or clinical expert. You need to know your data, your clinical trials, your competitors, your disease management, all these guidelines about diseases. You need to know in order to be a peer-to-peer discussion partner with a key opinion leader. And when you're having that discussion, like peer-to-peer discussion, that's when you get those clinical insights. And it becomes also interesting, right? It's not like me just talking to you like a sales rep, dumping all the things. Here, doctor, you should know about this. No, it's a conversation. And that information is really important for the internal stakeholders. That changes the strategy. That tells you, are we missing something? Because I've heard someone, they did the advisory board meeting, and the advisors had said, okay, the pathology testing for this mutation for this treatment is very short, 7 days. The MSL went out and said, yes, it's 7 days, but it's only 7 days in the university hospital settings. If you go a bit out, and maybe Germany is different, but Australia has a lot of rural areas and regional areas. There's a lot of hospitals there, but they don't have pathology or small pathology or only few pathology samples. And they only do a pathology sample when they have 10 or 20 samples, because otherwise it costs too much. So they said, no, it doesn't take 7 days, it takes 30, 40 days. That was the difference, because the patient can't wait 30 to 40 days before they have the answer of the test, before they can go on a treatment, because the doctor said, I can't wait, I'll put you on something else. So that insight was very important for them to say, guys, we need to change our strategy. We need to now work with the pathologists, the clinical societies, to make sure that pathology tests nationally can be done within 7 to 10 days. So that was an insight that the MSL found by talking to key opinion leaders, having an ad board, but also talking to people not in the ad board who might not be at that high level of your key opinion leaders, but maybe a bit later as a second or a third tier key opinion leader to get that information. So this cycle is really important. So it's not a one-way talking to the doctors. It's a cyclical process where you get insights from them and having a real conversation. And that drives the strategy, and it drives the product launch. Very important. Barbara, a quick question. Over which period of time does an MSL work on one drug? I'm not sure if I understand your question, but a drug can take quite a few years before it goes from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. It might even drop out, might have some side effects, it's not great. Then it goes to a launch, and then go on to the next, and then it goes to the market. Once it's approved for one indication, it can do clinical trials for another indication. So it could be leukemia, and then the next one is lymphoma, the next one is something else. So it could be many years. The thing is, once it's launched, the fun stuff is often the launch, and we call it peer launch, right? Before launch and after launch, so 2-3 years around it. A lot of the MSLs then say, okay, I want to go to a new drug, a more cooler drug, I move somewhere else. Or they say, okay, I now want to go up, I want to be more senior, I become a medical advisor. And instead of talking to the doctors all the time in the field and doing traveling, I now are in the office doing more strategic things, talking to the internal stakeholders. So I've seen people working 10, 20 years on a drug because there's so many stages and so many extensions. For instance, Humira, the drug I worked on, they have 10 or 12, 13 indications now. It's the biggest drug ever. Started with rheumatoid arthritis, and psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative ankylosing spondylitis. It's just so big. So you can have that whole career on one drug, perhaps, but that's a special drug. Katarina, does an MSL keep regular contact with the doctors after the drug has been used for feedback? So the idea is an MSL have constant interaction with the doctor. An MSL should be, if you do well, you should be the go-to person for the doctor to talk to you about anything they need to know about. So often you know them quite well. They pick up the, I mean, they phone you, got you on speed dial, especially the top guys or top girls you work with in advisory board meetings. So you have regular contact. Companies normally say 3 to 4 times a year. That's what you need to see each doctor roughly. So you have 40, 50, 60 doctors on your list. You see them 3, 4 times a year, makes roughly 160 to 200 visits a year. Face to face before COVID, now it's going to be different. So you should see them regularly. Then you have conferences, you see them. You might have a netboard, you see them. You might have a dinner meeting, you might have a conference or a symposia. You might have a project you're working with them. So it could be over the phone. So you kind of start to know these doctors quite well, and you can get pretty good relationships, working relationship with them. So it's a very dynamic discussions and interaction you have with them. So I hope that answers your question. So I deleted that one. Delete that one. Julio, how does a working day look for an MSL? I come to that in a few slides. Day-to-day work as an MSL. Here we go. Good question, Julio. So I put here just a few things. I mean, 12, 13 things, I think. It's a clock. I wanted to one by one, but it didn't work. The things you could be thinking about as an MSL. So let's start at 12 o'clock. Sharing, not selling. We share information and build advocacy for the drug and company and familiarity with the product when they have a clinical trial and be involved in it. So it's a lot of talking, a lot of data sharing. Products. I had 1 product in my first MSL role. I had 4 products in my second MSL role. I had 2 diseases in my first MSL role. I had 7 diseases, different diseases in my second MSL role. So it could be a bit of everything. Your territory could be Australia. I had the whole country. If you're in the US, you might have a few states. It could be just 1 state. For instance, New York, New Jersey might be very dense. Depends on how many doctors are there. You might have only 1 state. The Netherlands, it's small. You can probably do everything by car. Germany is a bit bigger. You might have north, south, east, west. So will you travel? Probably not with COVID now, but would you fly? Probably in Europe, you would use the train. I know in France, people use the TGV. Spain, they have multiple MSL. So it's a bit of, we call it the in-field role, right? You're in the field talking to doctors. And if you're not in the field, if you're close to the head office, you might go to the head office, in the office, sit in the office, or you work from home. So which gives you flexibility. You can do your laundry, your cooking while you do something else, while you read your paper. So there's the flexibility with that. So it depends a bit on the product, how big the product is, because if it's a small product, you might have 1 MSL. If it's a big product, you might have 5 or 10 MSLs. USF might have 50 MSLs per product. And the development as well. Do you have 1 disease that's being used for 4, 5, 6, 7 diseases? You work with the clinicians, so national and international experts. So you can work. I work with the top clinicians in the world that publish in New England Journal of Medicine, that are speaking at the biggest conferences in oncology, ASCO, ASH, you name it, and you would just sit them with a lunch, dinner, and you have a chat with them, which is great. You have international speakers coming over to do a clinical presentation for you, a tour around the country, and you sit with them, I don't know, 4 days in the car, plane, dinner, lunch, and you can suck their brain out about all the things about diseases. And so great. If you love to learn things, the MSL job is really great. The MSL should be an expert. So you should be an expert on the disease. That's for sure. The molecule, the drugs, the competitors, the treatments, the side effect profile. So you often are the person that people in the company would come to you to say, Martijn, or how does this work? Or how should we treat this? Or where can I find this? How does it work? What's the pathway? So that's you're the expert in the company. You will attend conferences. Let's see how COVID changed this, but national conference and international conferences. The nice thing about national conferences and international conferences, probably more national, you see a lot of doctors. So if you need to hit your target, seeing so many doctors a month, you go to a conference and you have a lot of doctors you see. So you meet up with them beforehand, or you tell them before, it's okay, let's meet up there during lunchtime or break time. And you can quickly see 10, 15, 20 doctors in a conference. You might have hit your quota for the month. The rest of the month is an easy month. So you share clinical data, the latest publication about your clinical data. You don't share data about other people's drug. It's only about your own drug, because that's, who should better talk about the drug than yourself and your company? And you don't want to do that by someone else. So you don't want your competitor to talk about your drug. So that's kind of a no-go. unless the trial is a head-to-head, right? That means your drug has been tested against another drug in a head-to-head trial. So within the same trial, you compare two drugs and you get an outcome. And then you can say, okay, ours is better than the competitor because the results is better. If it's two separate trials, you cannot compare them. Hold peer-to-peer meetings, so educational days with national and international experts. I've had dinner meetings, presentation when we had a clinical professor coming over sharing how these difficult drugs could be used in clinical trials, and before the clinical trial was set up. And you learn a lot from these guys and girls. I've been involved in clinical phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials, presenting the science to the doctors and the study coordinators, while the CRA was presenting more the protocol, more the policing, and I was more talking about the science. Really great. You talk again to the top national experts. You can do investigator, so ISS or IIS or IST means investigators sponsored study or investigator initiated study or investigator sponsored trial. These are trials, little trials or small trials. It could be big, but that's where the doctor has an idea, like a hypothesis, and wants to test it on patient with your drug. And often they do it when the drug has already been approved beforehand or for one disease, and say, I got a great idea. Can we test like a small sample, 50 patient, 100 patient, and if it's great, then we maybe do another trial bigger, and we do a global phase 3 trial or phase 2 trial. So you are involved in setting up clinical trials with these local doctors. You can be involved in advisory board meetings. So where you do that is you get the top doctors, top professors, clinical professors from the country, and you ask them for advice. So you have a day, half a day. Now it's Skype. I have one next week, which is about over Zoom. Normally it's a day, 6, 7, 8 hours, where you discuss your data, you share the data because they might have not seen it. You get input from them. What's good, what's not good, what's the challenges, what should we do, what are the things we could face that would not work out, like the clinical, the testing, the pathology testing, or education, finding the patient, disease awareness campaign, all those things. You get insight from the top professor that are treating these patients day in, day out. Medical queries, you might get medical information, doctors, patients, nurses calling up to the company saying, oh, how does this work? And you might have to answer that. So you might have to call them back. So you're not on the phone, but they might ask you a question. You might write an email back, or you call them back. Compassionate access, really great. A lot of company gives free drug out. So patients that do not qualify for a drug or could not afford the drug or were in between the drug that has been finishing the study, clinical trial study, and before it's approved by the regulators, there's often a gap there. So compassionate access often fill those gaps. So on my drug where I worked, Humira, I've given a lot of free drug to patient that required extra drug because the disease are flaring up, and the company would provide free drug to this patient to make sure that the disease was under control and they didn't have any flare-ups of their bowel and bloody diarrhea. So that's really great to help people get the right medication. So training on disease products, internal and external. So you often have to train the sales reps at conferences or before they go out in the field, or when a new sales rep comes on board, you need to train them. And that's where you can share your scientific knowledge. And that's a bit the year in the life of an MSL. So I hope that answers your question. I'm going to take a sip and I'm going to look at you any other questions. So that was answered, Julio. Margarita, does an MSL position include publishing? How important is publishing for an MSL compared to academia? So you will not publish, period. Publishing is not important, period. Very simple. You will never ever publish when you're in Omni. Probably never ever. Is it important to get into pharma? No, it's a nice. We come to that in the CV. It's a nice to have. If you've done a PhD, I assume you have published something. I mean, you do a PhD to do research to publish, and I mean, at least in the Netherlands, it was thesis about publication. So your thesis was like all your papers together and then a cover, and that was your thesis. So you didn't write a thesis, you just combined your papers and you wrote an introduction and discussion. That was it, which is a lot of work anyway, but publication is not important. Other things are way more important than publication, so don't worry about that. So I'm going to delete that, Margarita. Katerina, is every MSL responsible for one drug or a spectrum of drugs in a specific condition, context, and how easy it is to be knowledgeable in all the details? Okay, yeah. So give my example. AbbVie, I had anti-TNF, Humira for one disease, inflammatory bowel disease. Sorry, Crohn's disease, and we were working a bit on on ulcerative colitis, so 2. So 1 drug, 2 diseases. At Amgen, I had 4 drugs, 6, 7 diseases, and 4 or 5 trials. So probably 11 diseases. So it's going to be hard to keep up to date on all these things. So it requires you a lot of learning, a lot of reading, and be fast and quickly to pick up things. I actually had found there was oncology. Someone was doing, and at the time was still free, Sally's Church, biotech strategy blog. She was reporting on the clinical conferences overseas, and you can read it for free. So she was at a conference and she could actually see what was going on. So it was really great to hear from the latest research. So you don't have to read all the papers; you just heard it from here. I'm just gonna speed up a little bit because we're running a bit late, I think. Let me see how many slides I have done so far. Where are we? MSL role. A few more. Well, I might skip a few. Let's move a bit on. So MSL, week in MSL life, I think this is really interesting. So I just had 3 weeks, a regular week, international speaker week, where I had an international speaker from overseas, and another regular week. So this week was some admin in the morning, on Monday, some meetings. Tuesday, early flight, because I just needed to beat the traffic. Flight, different state. With advisory board, so a long day. Home, because I had MBA that night, MBA class. Next day, had a flight to a different state. It was a bit of a busy week. And then there was a day flight, which is not great, day flights, 7 p.m. home, so crazy days. Next day, some office, some admin expenses reading, and another Friday. I think I called it quits early that day because I had 2 long days. International speaker, this was crazy, never do this again. We went to a trial site meeting there. We had an 8 a.m. flight to Victoria. We discussed some slides he was going to present. We had a presentation. We did some admin, and we had a dinner meeting with 6, 7 doctors who were involved in the trial that he was working on as well. Hospital meeting, then fly to another state, presentation there, dinner meeting, early flight. This was crazy. Early flight to Queensland, so 2 states up, had a presentation, then 2 states, the other state for a presentation. I think I spent 8 hours on the plane that day, 2 flights, never do that. Then we had a conference, really nice, some dinner meetings, some presentations. So this was a crazy week, but learned so much. You were with this doctor, an international renowned speaker, every day, and it was a great chap. Learned so much. A regular week, office admin, 1 flight with 2 meetings, some bit of admin, dinner with a friend of mine, 2 appointments, meeting the representative, 1 TC, another appointment, some admin, another appointment, TC, flight home, 12 o'clock, call it a day. I think 3 p.m. home, call it a day. So these are 3 busy weeks. They're not always like this busy. So this is just that one. I'm going to be quick at this. So who do MSLs work with? Clinicians mainly. Maybe hospital pharmacists if it's a complex drug. I did it, complex drug. Pathologists if there's a pathology test needed, and trialists, people doing clinical trials. This is an interesting one, a bit about how the pharma looks like, the internal stakeholders, and where you see this in MSLs. MSLs here at the left bottom, you're part of the medical affairs department, where you have a medical director and some medical advisors. So often MSLs become medical advisors and then hopefully go up the ranks. You have clinical, of course, doing clinical trials. You've got regulatory affairs. They're doing work with the regulatory agencies like the EMA, the FDA, the TGA, getting a drug approved to be used in humans after clinical trials. You've got health economics of market access. They are working on reimbursement with the government or the private health insurance. And you have sales and marketing, doing marketing and selling. You have pharmacovigilance, which is called drug safety. Any side effects, you have to report medical information if there's any question about the drug. Quality assurance and compliance. Compliance is really big for MSLs as well, because there's big rules about what you can and can't do for an MSL working with doctors. You can't pay them, you can't have them dinner, you might have gone to dinner, but you have to have approval. You can't serve alcohol unless it's pre-approved. And if you don't do it, you get fined $50,000 for a glass of alcohol that you were not allowed to do. So yeah, a lot of compliance you need to know. Sales reps versus MSL. Big difference is sales reps sell, MSLs don't sell. That's the biggest difference. You see doctors at the same time. Often MSLs have more territory, bigger territory, because they talk to the top people in the top pyramid, while sales reps talk to anyone who's selling. They're commercially focused, while you're more balanced, unbiased. You just tell what it is, while the sales reps try to get in 3 sales messages why you should use this drug for which patient, and use even more. So that's a bit of difference. Often the job description looks pretty similar. That's why people are getting confused. Travel, there was a question. There's travel involved, like I showed you before. I think COVID will change it. It's kind of nice as well. You got the autonomy, you're free on your own. You can work from home, so you have the flexibility to do some other stuff while you're busy. I like the freedom a lot. Hotels, you got some great hotels. You got some friends you can meet in different states or different towns or different cities. They pay for your dinner, maybe a drink. So it's a pretty good life. You will be on the phone a lot, which is different. I think it's just really exciting. And you have constantly high level discussion with clinical doctors who are the top of their in the top of their field. So I think it's a very rewarding. But you have some overnight, like I said, Netherlands very small, Germany part you probably do driving. So a lot of countries in Europe might not have to travel overnight or stay overnight. Maybe 1 day, maybe 2 days. Conferences are always different, but as a scientist, you go to conferences anyway, so that's not different. If you're in the US, you have often bigger state, like multiple states, you might have to travel a bit more and maybe stay overnight. So it really depends on the country and how many MSLs are on that drug. What I really like is that there's a lot of companies to choose from. These are just the top, some of the top. As a scientist, you're stuck with your research. If you don't have a fellowship, it's hard to leave. If you invested 2-3 years of research time in it, you don't want to leave. This, you do a job, you learn. There's another drug coming out there 2 years later, which is cool, new CAR T cells. You move to something else, you learn something new. Yeah, so it's easier to move once you're in. Why is it so hard to become an MSL? And let me just check for time quickly. 1901. Should be right. I skipped this one. A lot of people say it's so hard because you need to have MSL experience to get in, but that's not true, because there's people without, people get promoted from MSL to something else, so they need to fill the job with someone new who doesn't have experience. So what it comes down to, and so they do this, they ask this in the job description, having 2 years experience, to cut the boys from the men and the girls from the women, to have people that are really interested and really know what they're talking about, not like, oh, it sounds interesting, let me do this job, did this MSL role. No, they make sure that people understand the MSL role, and that's where we help them from science to pharma to get that extra level of understanding the role, who you work with, what you do, how it works, what the job looks like on a day-to-day basis, what kind of guidelines, things you need to read to become experts and come across as a clinical discussion partner or peer-to-peer discussion partner. One thing you need to have is a LinkedIn account. I'm not going to do the poll now. You need to have a LinkedIn account because people are reaching out on LinkedIn. So it's the 21st century. Recruiters are on LinkedIn. Hiring managers are on LinkedIn. HR people are on LinkedIn. They're going to look for you on LinkedIn. So make sure your LinkedIn profile is good. A few things I just want to mention here, LinkedIn 101. There's a lot of courses and things you can look on how to do it, but professional photo is perfect. Don't be in your lab coat. Don't be on, I don't know, see people on the toilet taking photos in the car. Make a professional looking photo with a nice dress shirt or suit or something. As summary of your achievement, make it clear what job you're looking for. Some people say just are so generic, you have no clue what you're looking for. So if a recruiter is looking for something, it has to be clear that you're looking for an MSL role, not like an MSL role, a CRA role, and a sales rep role, and this role, because to me it sounds like you don't know what you want to do. So you can put in your headline, in your summary. One mistake, and we come to that in this CV, don't focus too much on your research past. You've done it, you got your PhD, but you're going now for a new job. I don't care so much about your old job. I want you to see that you're ready for the new job. I don't want to know that you're ready for your old job, that you're going to leave. You need to be ready for the job you're applying to for me now. So for instance, if you live in Germany, you go to France, and you need to work there, you're not going to say, I'm really good in German. They don't care. You need to be good in French because you're going to work in France and you need to speak French. So keep it in mind. You need to be ready for the new job and the new language and the new jobs at the task at hand. So remove all the pure science stuff from like I can do Western blotting in your skill sets. Those things have to be gone. So look at the MSL, what MSLs have there. Take, steal from them what they have. And you have to show them that you're ready for the next job, right? Like you can speak French when you go to France, not that you're really good in German or Dutch or English. You have to be good in something that you're going to apply to. And only then you can show that you are a good candidate and they're really willing to have a look at you. There's something about the interview role. It's really hard to become an MSL. And I mean, I remember my postdoc interview. The professor talked for 45 minutes out of the 50 minutes. Then she asked, so when can you start? Next year. Can you write a grant? Yes. Cool. See you next year. I mean, that was the interview. In MSL, you have a recruiter interview, phone, Skype, or face-to-face. HR interview, maybe. Then you have a hiring manager or a director of company who talks to you, and you need to know your disease knowledge, your clinical trial knowledge, your pharma knowledge, your MSL knowledge, your regulatory knowledge about the regulatory agencies, drug development, compliance about what you can and can't do as an MSL, reimbursement of drugs. I mean, all these things you need to know. Then you might have to have a presentation, a clinical paper presentation to a panel of people. They're going to ask you a difficult question. They might only give you 24 hours notice. Say, here's the paper, you got 24 hours and present. I had one say, oh, sit down, here's 45 minutes, here's a paper here, and there's a PowerPoint presentation that's already made. You got 45 minutes. Knock yourself out. So you have to be good, you have to be smart and quickly learning things. Then you might have an interview with the medical director and an online competency quest test. So a lot of things you need to do. You need to know everything to the max. So if you come in, sounds nice, I'm a good scientist, I've presented, I've published, and I've published in Cell, Nature, you're not going to cut it. You're going to quickly be out of the door and or not even selected. So if you think you're being fully prepared, do it times 2, times 3. You might be good prepared, well prepared then. So yes, a quick one. Career after the MSL role before we go to the CVs, because that's one big one people want to have. MSL, you can grow into senior MSL role, MSL manager, managing a team of MSLs, medical advisor, more strategic in the office, senior medical advisor, you get just more money. Associate medical director, you have a team of people underneath you, and a medical director, you have a whole team of people underneath you. That's within the medical department. You see a lot of people move to commercial roles, marketing, health economics, reimbursement, or like the drug reimbursement by the company, by the government. Business development, which drug should we in-license or out-license from companies, or people go internationally to a head office or regional head office, or yeah. So those are career opportunities MSLs can do. This is a quick test. Do this test, and then we go to the CV. Use your QR code, scan this one. It's a quick 15 questions. If you don't want to do it, you can go to the bathroom or have a sip of water. 12 questions about the MSL role. What is it that you like? What is it don't you like? And you can see if the MSL role is really something for you. Score 60% or higher, you are MSL material. 80% or higher, you're probably a strong MSL candidate, and 100% you're a perfect candidate. So have a scan of this or take a photo. You can always do it later on. I think it's a nice test. We developed this a few months ago. It's been downloaded several thousands of times. People have done it. And it gives you quickly a sense of, should I actually consider it or not? So yeah, score, we're not going to do this one. So Q&A, we've done a lot of Q&A. CV masterclass. So let me quickly check if there's any questions that are really great we should think about. I might want to do this later on. So Barbara, just a quick question. We are exactly at 11:30 we finish. Is that on the dot?
Yes, that's the planned finish. I mean, we can end 5 or 10 minutes later. That's fine.
I'll do my best. I'll maybe leave the questions to the end. So I'm going to go to the CV masterclass. If people, maybe I want to do the poll later on about the MSL suitability. I'm just curious to know what you guys scored. But let's move to the CV masterclass. I think this is a nice one. So I see a CV as a publication. It needs to have structure. You have a title, you have a a abstract, and you have cleared, identifiable, unless it's a nature paper, which your science is all over the place. But introduction, materials and methods, discussion, you see where you're looking. If you want to find something, introduction, you can quickly see it. So how do I read a paper? I look at the title, I read the abstract. If it's good, I read further. So how do I read a CV? I look at your title, so name, PhD, whatever. I look at your executive summary, which is your abstract. If it's good, I read further. If it's not good, I might read further, but the chance is not so great. So some simple CV suggestions that I have, depending a bit on the countries, 2 to 4 pages is probably a good one. You don't have a lot of experience, so you might not fill a lot of pages. I would put the doctor and a PhD in there. Title, maybe your phone, email, visa status, especially if you got a live in a different country. Can you work there? Are you allowed to work there? It's like your title of a publication, a correspondence and affiliates in a normal publication. That's what you put on the top, right? Executive summary is like the abstract of a publication. It's your 60 seconds where you can sell yourself and should I, as the audience, read further or not? Who's your audience? So make sure you use the right lingo and the right words. Like I said, key opinion leader, KOL, internal stakeholders, all those words we just mentioned today, those words you often see in the job description, those words you need to put in your CV, because then you talk the same language. They see, oh, he or she already knows what he's talking about. So make sure that's in there. Structure, I always say, so if you have a CV, just look at it from a distance. Does it look nice and appealing to the eye? I've had CVs with bullet points, different size, different width, different. It looked messy. It needs to look nice and tight and clear to find the different paragraphs. Use some bold sparingly for the like the heading, like introduction in the paper. And this guy might say my professional work experience or publication. Use it sparsely that you can find things. Some people use bold everywhere and you don't know what it is. I do use underline sometimes. If you want to emphasize something underline in the text, use that rather than bold, because otherwise everything becomes bold. Front load. So start with a powerful verb at the beginning. Achieve this, managed. So those words start with that in the beginning of the sentence. Result orientated. So make sure you use the right words. So the right numbers. Pharma likes to measure things. So make sure you use quantifiable numbers. Less scientific writing, more result orientated, powerful verbs. Keep it concise. So I would say no supplementary figures. So if you got 15 papers, mention you have 15, which is great. I'll put them at the end anyway. But say, okay, the 3, 4, 5 most relevant for this role has been provided here out of a total of 15. So they still know it's 15, but you don't want to show them all. I once had a CV 18 pages long, and with pain and a lot of pain and trouble, the person reduced it to 9 pages. It was still too much. 11, I think. So it probably has to be 2, 3, 4 pages. Keep it short and concise. Make it legible as well. So not too small graph, font size, and use the right font. Very important. So it has to be looking pleasant to look at this as a piece of paper. Nicely structured, nicely outlined, nicely bullet points. It makes it look nice to the eyes and inviting to read. Very important, adjust your CV to every single job you apply to. Very important, because every job is different. They use different words in their job description, so make sure you use the right words. So don't just make one size fits all. Yeah, you can tweak a few things, so you make a bit of a structure, and you can change a few things, but make sure you adapt it. The flow. This is what I normally do. Name, title, phone are at the top. Executive summary, that's your maybe 10 bullet points, 60 seconds to get your attention, 1 to 2 sentences long. I would go in order of importance, do this throughout your CV. So not the most important thing at the bottom. If I read the first 3 things, I want to hit the first 3 most important things. And I want to see, do you understand the role? And if you have extra knowledge about things, and we'll come to that for the MSL role soon. So I would tell people, if I only read this executive summary, I should be able to decide, should I get you in for an interview? Like an abstract, right? You read an abstract, the title abstract, is this worth reading my time? I spend an extra 10, 15 minutes reading this paper? Yes or no? If it's well written, you do it. If it's not well written, you might not get through. I would then move to professional work experience, reversely chronological. Talk about achievements. A lot of people talk about my responsibilities are. You can be responsible for everything and have not achieved anything. So make sure that you put about your achievements, result-oriented achievement. Make them somehow quantifiable. Committee administrative work is really great because it shows that you work with different external stakeholders, you work in teams, you work with, you have difficult discussions, so that's very important. If you don't have those things, start to get those ones. Like organizing these conferences like today, like Barbara and her team, great to put in your CV. You learn a lot from it. Teaching experience is great because teaching, presenting, it's a great one to do. And the rest, academic qualifications, grants, awards, papers, conferences, presentation, patents, yeah, not really needed. It's kind of nice, but so that's why it's at the end. So you might be surprised, but papers and all these things are not that important. One thing I like to tell you to avoid is dead fish, and I see a lot of them. I got great writing skills. I'm great communication skills. I'm a great presenter. Yeah, why is that? Because I received 2 awards for best written PhD thesis, or a finalist of 200 entrants in the 3-minute PhD thesis presentation. So back up what you say. So corroborate with evidence. So make sure to understand it. Careful with these things. Some people say, I'm a thought leader. I'm 23. I'm a thought leader, an entrepreneur, and social media influencer. I got 100 followers on LinkedIn or on social media. Careful what you say you want to be shown, because it might not be the greatest. I mean, if you made $1 million on LinkedIn or social media, great. You probably can say it. But if you got 500 followers, maybe not the best thing to say. Team player who can work independently. Be a bit more specific. Led committees as vice chair for this project with these many individuals. And so don't have that, we call it dead fish. Corroborate your things you're saying on your CV. I already did this one. So here I wanted to walk through the executive summary. So I can't do the whole CV. I mean, it takes a lot of time to do a whole CV and have everything there and review it. It takes us normally 1.5 hours just to review and CV. So there's a bit of work goes into it. I want to focus on the executive summary, and specifically for an MSL role. And I want you to think about what would be important for an MSL role is MSL knowledge or MSL experience. You don't have MSL experience, so at least MSL knowledge is important. Disease knowledge about the disease you're going to apply for. And having a key opinion leader network is important, and having understanding of clinical trials. So those 4 things is probably the most important you need to highlight in those, probably in that order. MSL knowledge, if you can, disease knowledge you're going to apply for, key opinion leader network, and clinical understanding of clinical knowledge. You might not have these things, but there's ways around it. And I'm going to walk you through a few, like 8 topics in the next 13 minutes. I'll try to be on time, Barbara. To go through. These are some examples. They're a bit long. You should probably shorten them, at least give you an idea what it is, what you can think about. So therapeutic area knowledge, what he here says, medical scientists with over 8 years of expertise in breast and lung cancer treatments using immune checkpoint inhibitors, ICI, and anti-angiogenic tyrosine kinase inhibitors. These are things pharma use, right? Checkpoint inhibitors, TKIs. So try to put those words in there. So this is about the disease. So if you apply to a breast cancer role or lung cancer, it makes sense, right? Because now I see you're over 8 years of breast cancer and lung cancer experience. Great, tick, because we need someone for breast cancer or lung cancer. You just mentioned in your first line in your CV, executive summary, you got this background. Tick. So what I want to do when I read the CV, I want to do tick, you got to tick, you got to tick, you got to tick, tick. I just want to tick all the time. When there's no ticks, I don't want to read further. If there's a lot of ticks, I say, yeah, this is an interesting candidate. So first tick. Second one, depends a bit how you do it, but it's important to understand the disease, right? So you're not breast cancer in mice or in a petri dish. You are working in humans, patients. There's guidelines. So doctors treat based on guidelines. There's different guidelines, national, international, European, American one, depending on which disease you're working on. One might be more than the other, more important than the other. Might be both important. Might be important depending on which hospital you work on, because I've seen some people follow the national guidelines, some people follow the international one, the other people follow the European one, and the next one follows the US one. So, but here, clear understanding of the treatment algorithms. These are again words pharma uses. Standard of care and toxicity management in breast cancer treatments as outlined in the NCCN, which is the US, and ASCO breast cancer guidelines, 2 guidelines. So this tells me, okay, you're not an MSL, but you know what the guidelines are. You know what standard of cares are, treatment algorithms. These are words that MSLs use all the time with their doctors. Okay, tick. A lot of ticks, right? Treatment algorithms, standard of care, toxicity management, guidelines. You know which guidelines there are. You mentioned 2 ones, so you probably read them. Okay, cool. Tick. MSL experience. You have no MSL experience, and it's going to be tough if you have no MSL experience. So we train people to become an MSL from Science to Pharma training. So what we tell people to write something about what they've learned. So we say, completed a global MSL training course by From Science to Pharma, which gave me a thorough understanding of the role of the MSL throughout the product lifecycle of the drug, which we discussed before. On and off-label discussions, we haven't discussed, but which is very important as MSL. Internal and external stakeholder management, in-field insight generations, etc. Finished my exam with a score of 100%. So, okay, you've done extra things that a lot of other people haven't done. So you might not have MSL experience, but you know what you're talking about because all these things are important things. So tick, 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 tick. Cool. Let's move on. Key opinion leaders network. You might have it if you work in a hospital setting or with clinical trials, perhaps. Or, I mean, I used to work in a hospital during my PhD, and we had multidisciplinary team meetings with clinicians. So I knew some of the clinicians. Mention them. So you can say if you had them, I've got an established network of oncologists, clinical investigators, and you might just name the names, maybe the departments, but I would probably keep it shorter. Professor David, Professor Chris Mallet, stuff, you mention them. So what if you don't have that? I mean, you might not have it, but you can still find them. Google is really good. So you can find who is the head of department in your hospitals in Germany, in Netherlands, in France, in breast cancer. You can find the head of department. That's probably key opinion leader. You can find the drugs that have been recently approved in breast cancer and look who is on the title as an author, and you look at the affiliation. Is it in your country? That will be a key opinion leader. You download the clinical disease guideline from ASCO and NCCN, your national guideline. You look who is on there. You go to the clinical society of your country for breast cancer. You see who's the president this year, last year, next year, incoming, outgoing president, who's the vice president. Those are probably clinicians high up in that field of breast cancer who are key opinion leaders. So you can find your key opinion leaders here. You don't have an established network, but you know who they are. So you can say, okay, clear understanding of who are the key opinion leaders in Australia, France, Germany, and you list 5 or 10, probably say 10. You can tick this one, tick. Shows me you've gone the extra mile, you know what you're talking about. You can find your key opinion leaders. You might not have an established network with them, but at least you know who they are. Better than having nothing. So tick. Communication and public speaking, I'm just looking, 8 minutes. Excellent science communicator, both verbal and written, illustrated by multiple scientific, see, this is kind of not a dead fish, illustrated by multiple scientific articles, presentations at oncology conferences, including national use oncology conferences and medical rounds at Harvard School of Medicine, a bit long. No numbers, what he or she has earned, like medals or awards. I would probably put it here, best PhD student, best presentation. Conjoined senior lecturer at the University of Yale Medical School. So a few things you can put here. It's important because an MSL role is public speaking. It's one-on-one, it's presentation, it's teamwork, it's connecting people, moderating things in like an advisory board if you're going to do that. So you should be a good communicator. So another tick. Code of ethics. You probably never heard of code of ethics. I think, I mean, you might have heard of it, but probably never really thought about it. Pharmaceutical industry is probably one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world, and people always talk about pharma buys doctors and stuff. And I mean, these are all these conspiracy theories and things that will never happen. There's such a clear rules what you can and can't do. I mean, you can't even buy a coffee for a doctor because it has to be reported, and it's very strict. So code of ethics or code of compliance is something you can read, download, and get familiar with. So not a lot of people do that. So it shows that they haven't done the extra thing, but you can do it and learn about it and show it on your CV that you are knowledgeable about it. Again, a tick that not everybody's doing, and it will help them. Early stage drug development experience, it's kind of nice. Probably what's better is understanding clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. There are clinical trial guidelines, ICH guidelines. Make sure you read a few of them, or at least are aware of them and maybe read 1 or 2. Good clinical practice. Again, tick, you understand about clinical trials, how they're being conducted, what's important for them, shows that you come prepared. You don't have clinical experience, doesn't mean you cannot Google. You can say, okay, I know which drugs are being used. So say, for instance, the drug in this case was pertuzumab, trastuzumab for breast cancer. Mentioned the clinical trial, Cleopatra trial, and the NCTN, so the clinical trial number. You can look it up and mention it. I mean, to me, we're saying, okay, you've done some extras, cool. You know where to find these things. Great effort. Tick. Bringing a drug to the market is this comprehensive understanding of phase 1, 2, 3, 4 trials. This is the one I mentioned about ICH guidelines. ICH guidelines are important for clinical trials. They're the standard guidelines. Something to understand for your MSL role. Approval process or regulatory approval process by the EMA or FDA in the US. Those things you can learn. Even though you have never been in MSL, these are things you can learn, put in your CV. You don't need a diploma for it. You just put them on there. Because if I don't see them, I don't know you've done it, I will not get you in for an interview. If I see you've done it, you are really good and upskilled, I might give you the benefit of the doubt, even though you don't have MSL experience. I get you in, and you can present and show me how good you are. And I might say, you know what, this person is really great. Let's move to the next round. Planning our organization, always important, because MSL is doing a lot of organization planning, sometimes conferences, international speaker tours, anything like today, this Horizon presentation. Very important to do these things and put on your CV. So that was a quick run through to the CV CV masterclass. Some tips: try to match focus your previous work experience achievements in line with the key skills they're looking for in a new role, right? So competencies and knowledge that are relevant to the MSL role. So everything you write and think about how does it relate to the MSL role. So if I write something down from the past, does it make sense for my new role? Western blotting, no. Facts analysis, no. Mouse research, no. Don't put it on there. You're never ever going to do that. So think about, organizing committees, conferences, symposia, yes, that's important, so put it on there. So think with your head forward about the role, not about the past, but the future job. So each time you think about writing something, every single line, how does it relate to the MSL role? Try to use clinical terminology in your CV, or at least lingo that the pharmaceutical industry uses, which are often found in the job description, where you can match them really easy. This again shows you that you're versatile and verbally adapt to the new environment and speaks like you speak the same language. Should I list my publications? That was a question I raised it before. Only do the most relevant at the end of the CV, and only mention a few, and say I might have another 15, but I showed you 3 out of the 3 most important ones up there. So that was a quick one. I'm just curious. So that was maybe some questions there. I want to have a quick Google, a quick poll about let's click back, about what people scored. So what was your score? So team, was it Carolina? I'm not sure. Could you open the poll for your score? I'm curious if you've done it. I hope you've done it. And what you scored for your audience. Just curious to see if in the beginning no one had heard about the MSL role. And so while you do that, I'm going to answer a few questions because there's 2 more minutes. I want to be on time. I'm a PhD in molecular biotechnology. Can you kindly guide us about the opportunity in pharma? I think I spoke a lot about the MSL role. I think that's a great topic. Other pharma roles, maybe not the time for today. So happy to answer that maybe later on via email. How high are my chances in finding an MSL job in Germany, Switzerland without high German German language? Start learning, read. No excuse. Start learning German. That's only what I can say. So probably not high, so learn your German. Katarina, with a PhD background and a future in MSL, how to introduce my experience in an attractive way without referring to research? Is it about referring to other skills obtained able to work in a group? I think I just went through the CV, right? There's a lot of things you can learn now that you've never learned before in your research that are important for the MSL role. I mean, clinical guidelines you've never read before, a disease guideline you never read before. Those are things you can learn, put in your CV, and make sure you upskill yourself on that and show that you're a worthy MSL candidate. Margarita, what skills, experience are important to get from a PhD to get the MSL afterwards? Working clinical, more clinical, not like how does this protein works, and try to work on diseases that would work. Try to work with clinicians in hospitals, that works. Try to work on clinical trials and do a lot of reading. You can learn about disease guidelines now. You can read them now. Instead of a paper, read this disease guideline. Instead of reading a research paper, read a clinical paper about a clinical trial, phase 3 clinical trial. Get you familiar on those things. Get yourself familiar with clinical statistics, biostatistics. So a lot of things you can learn now. So I hope that answers your question. Did you do a part-time MBA? How would you say it helped you in your MSL role? I did a part-time MBA role, cost me 5 years and a lot of money. It was the best thing probably for me. I loved it. Is it MSL? Is it needed for the MSL role? No. Is it helpful for later? Yes. Can it get you into a medical advisor roles later on? Yes. So once you're in pharma, try to have them pay for it or partly pay for it and do it. It helps you understand, think differently, more commercially, and I think it's great. So definitely do it if you can pay for it, or maybe it's free in Germany, in Europe. I'm not sure. Julio, applying for an MSL role, which is unrelated to your PhD background, is more about selling yourself to the jobs with the skills you have acquired rather than your research. Is it right? You can. I mean, if I would go for a cardiovascular role, that's too far away from me. So pharma is new, MSL role is new. Try to stick to your research, or at least something that's closer to your research. So I did immunology, cancer vaccines. I went through for inflammatory bowel disease and autoimmune disease, which is immunology related. So it's kind of closer, right? I didn't go for cardiovascular because it's way out of my scope. So try to stick to something in your research area that you can make it into a disease that you say, I kind of know what I'm talking about. I can learn quickly, rather than something completely new. So stay close to what you already know. Applying for an MSL job, which is I already did that one. Simi, I guess learning technique is more important than publishing, right? Learning techniques. Yeah, yeah, I think so. Do you have fellowships or exchange programs for PhD students? I think that's not really relevant because pharma doesn't do PhD fellowships. How does MSL companies work hierarchically wise, and how much the daily tasks are delegated onto different teams? As an MSL, you're in the field, right? You need to meet your metrics and your targets. You're your own boss. As long as you meet your targets, no one's really going to look at what you're doing. As long as you do everything right, compliantly, legally, ethically, you're on your own and you call with people on the phone all the time. But you work as a team, maybe multiple MSLs. You talk to them on a daily basis. You might have a team meeting, but it's you don't delegate as an MSL. It's you and your team and your boss maybe. Does MSL usually work individually or as a team? I think I remember that. It's a bit of both. I just mentioned that one. Katarina, how important is to present data about preclinical data? It's nice, considering that the data are subject to changes at your side. You would not use it a lot as an MSL. You would use clinical phase 3 paper presentations, so late data, not early presentations. Should the methodology like Western blot be put on CV? No science whatsoever, ever. Or just the title of project places enough, and maybe clinics related methods, and spend more space on the organizing experience. Organizing experience, again, you're never going to experience, so don't put it on there. So think bigger things, organizing things. So research, you can really reduce it. It's not about the pipeline, the petri dish research. It's really focused on big things. So the research is nice. You take PhD, great. You can learn. You're smart. You're a doctor. But the other things I said, clinical trial guidelines, regulatory guidelines, all the other things that you don't know of, learn those things and put those things on your CV. Then write it about the Western blot or mouse experience. So that was a quick one. Polls. Open. 5% had 60% or less. So probably I would tell you, don't become an MSL. So perhaps not right for you. I have almost 50%, 60 to 80%. So a career you should definitely explore further. I think we have a free webinar. Go on our website, www.fromscience2pharma.com/resources. We can free webinars. I think next weekend we have 10 sessions, so you can join for free, learn a bit more about it. Probably you've learned a lot of already today, so maybe you don't need to attend. 24% says 81 to 90%, so that I would say you are right for the MSL role. 11% is 91 to 99%, so you are, I mean, I'd say, what are you waiting for? Just start applying once you finish. And 11% has 100%, so the perfect career for you. So great. I think more, so if so many people, 2/3 didn't know about this job beforehand, I think it's great to see so many people have at least the skills and interest in this. And yeah, I got a sore throat, Barbara. I think I'm 4 minutes late. I don't want to ruin your planning, so I'm going to give it back to you. It was lovely speaking to the whole group, and I had a great time.
Well, Martijn, thank you for finishing on time. And I'm sure we all really enjoyed your workshop. We got great insights into the MSL job. And we had between 80 and 100 participants, I think, over the webinar. So really great turnout.
Great.
And I'm sure we have all learned a lot, which we can take away.
I hope so. People can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or email fstp@fromscience2pharma.com. I can send it to you, or you can share it with them. Always happy to answer some questions. It was a pleasure, and I think you did a great job with your team today organizing this. And I'm going to have some dinner. It's 7:30 for me.
Yeah, thank you very much. Go ahead, Martijn.
My pleasure. Have a good one.
Thank
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, people. So the next talk is by Christian Tidona, and you can join by clicking on the sticky message on top of the chat. So hopefully see you there. I hope you've enjoyed this workshop. Bye. Enjoy the rest of the conference.